We have always been told that time is a straight line. We are taught that human history is a linear progression, a steady climb from the darkness of the caves to the light of the Silicon Age. We believe we are the pioneers of consciousness on this planet. But this is a comforting illusion. If you strip away the textbooks and listen to the whisper of the ancient world, a different, far more terrifying pattern emerges. We are not the drivers of this vehicle. We are merely the latest passengers. We are not the first attempt. We are simply the version that survived the last formatting. Every major ancient culture, the Sumerians, the Maya, the Vedic sages of India, the priests of Egypt, they all speak of the same thing. They do not speak of evolution, they speak of cycles. They describe a world that is periodically wiped clean and rebooted, like a corrupted operating system, every 12 to 13,000 years. And now modern science is beginning to find the fingerprints of this mechanism. In the ice cores of Greenland, in the erratic graphs of solar activity, and in the magnetic anomalies of the ocean floor, the rhythm is visible. It is too precise to be an accident. It is the heartbeat of a machine. Consider Göbekli Tepe. For decades, archaeologists called it a temple. They told us that primitive hunter-gatherers who had not yet invented the wheel or pottery somehow dragged 50-ton pillars across the landscape to pray to imaginary gods. But the evidence suggests something far more functional. 12,000 years ago, this massive complex was not destroyed by an enemy. It was buried, deliberately. Radiocarbon dating of the soil reveals that the site was covered in a single massive effort. The fill is uniform. It was done quickly, efficiently, and with frantic purpose. Why would a primitive culture spend decades building a monument only to bury it immediately? You do not bury a temple. You bury a time capsule. You bury a seed vault. Göbekli Tepe was not a place of worship. It was a backup station. It was a data ark sealed hermetically before the cataclysm, preserved by those who knew the system restart was imminent. They were trying to save the knowledge for the next iteration, for us. And they didn't just hide their knowledge, they hid themselves. Look at the underground cities of Cappadocia. Derinkuyu extends over 100 meters into the earth, a labyrinth of 18 distinct levels, capable of housing 20,000 people. Official history says this was a refuge from local raiders. But you do not build a complex with sophisticated ventilation shafts reaching the deepest levels, independent water supplies, and massive stone blast doors that can only be closed from the inside, just to hide from a few bandits on horses. This is the architecture of survival on a planetary scale. This is an anti-radiation bunker. This is a fallout shelter designed by a civilization that knew the sky was about to burn. They understood the cyclical nature of the Earth. They knew the surface would be sterilized, so they went down into the womb of the planet to wait out the purge. But who were they, and why were they so different from us? The answer lies in the prohibited translations of the Sumerian tablets. The Anunnaki do not describe the creation of man as a singular magical event. They describe it as a process of engineering, a series of trials and errors, a sequence of software updates. The texts are chillingly specific. They list the generations of humanity not as ancestors, but as versions. They speak of the first ones who were too great in stature. These were the giants. We find their bones in the burial mounds of North America, in the deserts of China, and the frozen soil of Siberia, skeletons exceeding 3 or 4 meters in height. Science calls them hoaxes, yet the Smithsonian archives are filled with reports of skulls with cranial volumes 50% larger than a modern human's. These were not monsters. They were version 0.9, a hardware test. But they were biologically expensive. They required too much energy, too much food. They were powerful, but inefficient. And so, they were discontinued.
Then came the second iteration. The texts describe beings who possessed the voice of the wind and heard the thoughts of the gods. These were the telepaths, a version of humanity designed with a heightened connection to the collective consciousness. But this was a security risk. A subject that can read the mind of its master cannot be enslaved. A subject that knows the truth cannot be controlled. They were too independent, too dangerous. The project was scrapped. The Anunnaki realized that for a worker race to function, it must be limited. And so we arrived at version 3.0, Homo sapiens. Look at us. We are smaller, we are weaker. We have no telepathic ability. We are disconnected from the universal field. We are the stable release. We are the optimized version. Smart enough to operate the machinery of civilization, smart enough to mine the gold and build the cities, but too limited to understand the true nature of the reality we live in. We were not created to be gods. We were created to be compatible with the system. The evidence of the reboot is everywhere. If you look at the data without the lens of dogma, 12,000 years ago, the planet experienced the younger Dryas impact. Temperatures skyrocketed and then plummeted in the blink of a geological eye. This was not a natural climate shift. This was a thermal shock. It looks exactly like a system reset, a global formatting of the hard drive. During this exact window, the megafauna of the world vanished. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, entire ecosystems were deleted instantaneously. It was not a slow extinction, it was a liquidation. The biological slate was wiped clean to make room for the new installation. And immediately after this destruction, we see the sudden, unexplained emergence of high civilization. In Egypt, in Peru, in Baalbek, we see the construction of megalithic structures that we still cannot replicate today. There is no evidence of the tools used to build them. There is no trial and error. One day there is nothing, and the next day there are pyramids aligned with the stars with laser-like precision. This is not evolution. This is deployment. The infrastructure was laid down for the new batch of workers. But here is the most disturbing thought, the most forbidden line in the Sumerian cuneiform. Not all were erased. Those who remembered the beginning went into the deep. This implies that the previous versions, the giants, the telepaths, the ones with the light in their minds, they did not all die. They were not all successfully deleted. They did not fly away in spaceships. They retreated. They utilized the underground networks like Cappadocia. They withdrew into the cavern systems that riddle our planet's crust. They are the origin of the legends of the Agartha, of Shambhala, of the hollow earth. They are the reason we have an instinctive, primal fear of the dark and the deep places. Because deep down in our genetic memory, we know we are not alone on this planet. We are the surface dwellers, the ignorant, happy workers living in the sunlight of version 3.0. But beneath our feet, the older versions, the stronger versions, the ones who know the truth about the architects, may still be alive, waiting, watching the cycle approach its end once again. Because the clock is ticking, The 12,000-year cycle is closing. The magnetic poles are shifting. The sun is waking up. The anomalies are returning. And the question remains, when the architects return to check their project, will they be satisfied with version 3.0? Or is it time for another upgrade? Is it time for another purge? We think we are the pinnacle of creation, but in the eyes of the Anunnaki, we might just be obsolete software waiting to be overwritten.